COVID curb backfires. SNP leader clashed by scientists as measures to protect Scotland come to naught. Nicola Sturgeon faces humiliation after her lazy lockdown approach was slammed by her own pandemic advisor. Epidemiologist Professor Mark Woolhouse urged the First Minister to rule out another hugely damaging lockdown amid climbing Omicron infections. Reflecting on the lockdown response to climbing cases in March 2020 and January 2021, he said it was a lazy solution to a novel coronavirus epidemic and hugely damaging. Instead of sweeping curbs on public life, he suggested a lighter touch approach similar to that seen in Sweden. The Omicron variant has been spreading rapidly across the UK, with cases in Scotland exceeding 20,000 for the first time today. Despite soaring cases, hospitalizations have so far remained relatively stable, suggesting the Omicron variant is less severe than previous strains. In light of the latest data, Professor Woolhouse said, there is still no good case for a full lockdown. Lockdowns aren't a public health policy. They signify a failure of public health policy. If we end up there again, it will be because we didn't get the public health messaging right, because we failed to protect the vulnerable and didn't order enough test kits. That's something which should have been attended to when it was obvious that Omicron would cause a huge surge in cases. The First Minister has urged people to stay at home as much as possible while infections remain high. New limits on large public gatherings forced the cancellation of New Year's Eve street parties in Scotland for the second year. The cancellation of large public gatherings included the Hogmanay celebrations planned for Edinburgh, which usually attracts tens of thousands of people. Ms. Sturgeon will give an update on the COVID-19 situation to MSPs at 2 p.m. Wednesday when Holyrood reconvenes virtually, despite the House still being in recess. The country's National Clinical Director Jason Leitch failed to rule out further restrictions. He said, "I hope we can get away without anything too dramatic on top of what we've already done. I'm very conscious that there are people in the economic advice space, the mental health advice, the social policy, the education, of course, and those who have businesses and employees who have taken a hit in the few weeks leading up to Christmas. We don't want that to last any longer than it needs, but the public health advice is that Omicron remains a danger to the country. In fact, the World Health Organization, WHO, advises that it remains a danger to the whole world, and therefore you should act very cautiously if you decide to remove protections." But Scottish Government advisor Professor Woolhouse believes masks, testing and encouraging Scots to reduce unnecessary contact should suffice. Nicola Sturgeon is set to give a coronavirus update to the Scottish Parliament later this week after cases reached record numbers over New Year. Presiding Officer Alison Johnston confirmed earlier today that MSPs would hear from the First Minister during a virtual sitting on Wednesday. The SNP leader will give a 20-minute statement on the latest figures from across the country and announce if any new measures will be introduced to halt the spread of COVID. The meeting, for an update and questions on COVID, will be entirely virtual. Figures published today show 65,860 new tests reported results and 34.9% were positive. Monday's figures include a note advising of delays in between tests being taken and results being reported, but saying Public Health Scotland is monitoring the situation. There were 1,031 people in hospital on Sunday with recently confirmed COVID, and of these 38 were in intensive care. A total of 4,383,212 people have received their first dose of a COVID vaccination, 4,017,051 have received their second dose, and 2,992,583 have received a third dose or booster. The daily data for January 1 and January 2 was also published on Monday. A total of 17,065 new cases were reported on January 1 and 14. 080 were reported for January 2.